Palworld has absolutely been taking the gaming world by storm. Love it or hate it, this thing is massive, and if you're jumping in, there's a lot to learn, and a lot of things the game doesn't quite spell out for you. It is a survival game type thing after all. So here are 10 tips for you to get started. Let's get started off with number 10. This is a useful trick discovered by user JKX71. Now, when you're starting out, it doesn't take too much to get over encumbered. When you go over your carrying weight, it can slow your character down, so they can't really sprint as much, and eventually you can't move at all. It's really, really annoying, like it is in a lot of games, but there is a way to make it so you can still sprint even when you go over your carry limit. The trick is pretty simple. Just drop any resources you have on the ground so that you're not overweight. Be sure to drop, not discard the items. If you discard them, they're just gone forever. Dropping them puts them in little items on the ground, which is what you want for this trick to work. Now just back up a little and sprint forward. While holding the sprint key or sprint key button down, collect anything you dropped on the ground and you'll be able to continue sprinting even when you're over encumbered. Your overall speed is a little slower, and be sure not to try and carry too much, because if you're picking up enough where you can't move at all, this trick doesn't work. But if you're only around 10 points or so over the limit, then the game will just let you keep sprinting. If you stop at any point, then you'll have to drop your stuff again and start over. But even with that downside, this trick makes it much easier to get all your stuff back to your base without having to either abandon anything or force you to make multiple trips. It's likely that they'll patch this out eventually, but at least at the time of writing this video, it still works. Next, over at number 9, here's a pretty great trick for getting up in the air quickly. Just use a pal sphere on an easy to capture creature, then climb on top of the sphere while it's in the middle of capturing. And if the creature gets caught, then you're suddenly launched hundreds of feet into the air. Yeah, it's probably like some early access jank type stuff, a glitch, but still. We can't take credit for finding this one. This trick was discovered by a Redditor named BLKMonty01, and it works exactly as they describe. It's not something that we expect will stay in the game long though. Like I said, it's just some early access weird stuff, but it's fun to mess around with while it lasts, maybe gain some quick height, and it's pretty easy to do. The main thing to remember is that you want to be standing on top of the sphere while it's capturing. If it finishes while you're clinging to the side, then it won't work. So give yourself plenty of time and you'll get launched into the air pretty much every time. Next, over at number 8, like Hogwarts Legacy and some other games, one of the easiest ways to make money in Palworld is just to be a ruthless evil poacher. Just capture as many pals as possible, then sell them to merchants for a big profit. That's dark enough on its own, but what you may not have known is that you can also sell human beings. Yes, this Pokemon-like kid-friendly crafting game has human trafficking in it, and it's actually pretty easy to do. So first, you'll need to capture a human. Any NPC in the game can be obtained with a pal sphere. There is no indication that it can be done when you aim a sphere at a person, but it does sometimes work. Now, with a human in your pocket, you can put them to work at your base or just sell them off, the same as any pal. The two types of merchants that will buy pals and humans are pal merchants, which tend to be in the settlements around the islands, and the black marketeers, who are more hidden but always appear in the same spots at least. So you can actually sell people to either one of these guys. It doesn't actually matter which, and humans are actually worth a lot, so it's actually worth it to capture some people and sell them off if you want to make some quick cash. We're talking about video games. Please don't clip this out of context. It's not real. Let's move on. Over at number 7, one of the more useful tools in Palworld is the grapple gun, which is very handy for climbing cliffs or just speeding up traversal through the world. The only real downside to these things is the cooldown, which severely limits what you can do with this tool. There is a quick way around it though. Just equip 2 grapple guns at once. Each grapple has its own cooldown, so if you want to grapple again quickly, just switch to your backup and do it again. This also allows for some pretty fun little tricks, because when you switch from from one grapple gun to another, that cancels the pull, which sends you flying in a direction. Now you can target a wall and not just grab onto it, but fling yourself over it and use the second grapple to pull yourself to safety. Kind of like Just Cause style, but in a weird, broken, glitchy way. With the higher level grapples that you can get, they have faster cooldowns and you can do even crazier stuff. We're not skilled enough to go full-blown Spider-Man and just swing everywhere, but it seems like it's kind of possible. Next, over at number 6, one good thing about Palworld is how it allows you to automate many of the most boring parts of crafting games. Instead of forcing you to do everything, you can actually work smart, not hard. Have your pals work for you. It's mostly a pretty simple system that we don't need to explain, but there are a few tricks you can do to make your pals work more efficiently in your base. For starters, if you want a specific pal to work on a specific workbench or job, then just walk over to them, pick them up, and then throw them at the thing you want them to work on. That'll force them to prioritize that job over anything else. This is especially useful for pals who can do a lot of things. Because they're so versatile, they'll often go and do something that you don't want them to do right now. So picking them up and throwing them at the thing is very useful for getting confused or easily distracted pals back on track. Now, one other way to make pals stronger is to condense them. You do this by placing a pal in a condensing machine, which will combine multiple pals into one better one. This doesn't just increase their stats, it also has the added benefit of making them more efficient workers. So condensing is useful even for pals that you aren't using in combat. It starts to take a lot of these guys to reach higher ranks after a while, but just 1 or 2 upgrades can make a big difference. We did want to give credit to user Tux TV for figuring this one out. We would have never known without this comment. Next at number 5, unlike some games of this type, which have confusing algorithms for how monster spawning works, in Palworld it's all pretty simple, it seems. If there's a certain pal you're looking for in an area but can't find, then just leave the area or leave the island and come back. Depending on where you are, this can be as easy as just swimming away for a second and coming back, or just fast traveling out of the area and then fast traveling back into it. Do that and all the pal spawns in the area seemingly reset, refreshing everything in the immediate area and hopefully making any pals you're looking for appear, at least at some point. Like this is also useful for farming the human enemies for experience, and it even works against bosses. Just leave the boss area and then come back and they'll reset. So if you want a different creature or just one with different traits, then it's really that simple. Next, over at number 4, we found this out the hard way, but if you've got a wooden base, then you're going to want to keep any fire pals away from it, because wood isn't just flammable, the flames can spread, so it's possible to lose all your hard work in the blink of an eye. If your base does catch on fire, the best way to keep it from spreading is to simply disassemble the parts that are on fire. You'll have to rebuild the lost parts, but at least you can get back your resources and it immediately puts out anything that's on fire. It's sort of a weird video game solution, but hey, it works and it beats your whole base burning down by accident. The fire pals are great. They're very useful in specific spots on your base, but if you build a big wooden castle, just hope they don't attack anything near there. That could be a disaster. Now, over at number 3, if you're paying attention to the game and see that it uses a lot of elements from other games, it should come as no surprise that they have their own version of shinies called Lucky Pals. These unique variants of the pals are way bigger and shinier, and they have unique traits that regular pals can't get. They're also pretty rare, so much so that it's possible to play through all of the available early access content and barely see one. Visually, these guys do stand out, but they can kind of get lost in the scenery, so if you really want to catch one of these things, then what you really need to do is listen for them. Yes, whenever one appears in your vicinity, a little jingle plays. That little musical cue is your clue that one of these things is nearby. Like, depending on where you are, you're way more likely to hear the jingle than you are actually see one of these guys. So keep the volume turned up and listen when you're hunting for lucky pals. That's probably your best way to find them, at least as of right now. Now down to number 2, we'll admit it, this one is more of an Easter egg, but it's odd enough to mention. At this specific spot in the world here, you can find this weird character named Reincarnated Guy, who is basically just a big joke on isekai protagonists. He talks about how he was killed and suddenly appeared in Palworld, but with an amazing new power. If you're unfamiliar with the whole isekai phenomenon, it's this subgenre of anime with a basic premises of like a normal person getting transported into a fantasy world. Usually, they'll have some kind of overpowered ability. It's a power fantasy, basically. So what amazing power does this guy get? He can generate pizza from his hands. Then he gives you a slice. Completely pointless, but hey, free pizza. I guess pizza's on him. Finally, down at number 1, the major platforms for Palworld are currently Steam and Xbox and PC Game Pass. Both have their pros and cons, but if you want the most up-to-date version of the game with the most implemented features, then the Steam version really is superior. Now, we don't know how accurate all of this will be in the next few days with updates and stuff, but at least at the time of making this video, the Game Pass version of Palworld is missing some features that the Steam version has. There are no dedicated servers on Game Pass, so the only way to play online is through online co-op. Strangely, there is no way to exit out of the game on PC Game Pass. You have to either Alt F4 or tab out and manually shut the game down, do your thing. The Game Pass version also apparently still has some developer cheats still in the game, which is actually kind of interesting to us. But being able to use mods for the Steam version overwrites that. That's the coolest thing. If you're primarily an Xbox player, then some of these changes are minor, but not that big a deal. But if you're a PC player who's using Game Pass, it's really going to feel like you're getting the second-class treatment here a little bit. The problem is a boring one. It's like a corporate one. It boils down to the certification process for Microsoft. It puts many Game Pass games a week or so behind the Steam version in terms of updates, and that's actually a consistent problem with Game Pass games. Also, keep in mind that these really are two different versions of the game with their own problems. One is built for the PC platform while the other is for Xbox. Yes, even the Game Pass one, which is odd, but that's just how Microsoft does it here. Obviously, it's up to you to decide which version you prefer. It's not that big of a deal. The Game Pass one is cheaper because it's only the price of a subscription, while the Steam version is more expensive, but it is technically the primary version of the game that's a little bit more up to date. Now, there are players switching from Game Pass to Steam if they like it enough, and probably for good reason. If you're in this game for the long haul, then getting the Steam version just makes sense to us. That's everything we got, but we got one more one, like some bonus tips about moving your camp or your base. Don't feel the need to move your home base right away. If you find a pretty new location and you want to set up near a waterfall or something, more power to you, but setting up near the starting area and sticking there for a good chunk as you develop is a good move, even if it's a little more boring. There are consistent resources there and everything you need, so your pals will always be chopping wood, gathering berries, stuff like that. You might find a nice area later on and set up, only to realize if you need some extra wood in a pinch, you gotta walk 3 minutes to go get some. It sounds like nothing, but early on in the game, it can get old fast until you get your productions established properly. Having a nice cozy spot near the start is fine anyway, because fast travel is generous. It's practically anywhere, as long as you find and unlock those glowy red-orange statues you see in the distance. As for moving your base, the game gives you the option to abandon your old camp from the map screen, so you don't have to manually go there and do it. In reality, all this really does is remove your PAL box for you to put it somewhere else. So if you have stuff stored in crates at your base, you're gonna have to trudge back and forth and move your stuff over to the new one. At least that's what we've learned now. This is a survival game after all. There is going to be some tedium. Also, be mindful of where you place your PAL box in an area. PALs spawn from the air directly behind the box, so you need to make sure they're not spawning in a weird spot, or like me, where they end up spawning on a rock plateau where they can't get down. Every time I go back home, I have to pick up the creatures and manually toss them off the rock. So yeah, careful where you put your PAL box. You could have them spawn and get stuck somewhere. Maybe, maybe not. It's early access. It's messy sometimes. Just be careful where you drop your roots. Anyway, those are 10 or so tips and tricks for the game. A couple of things the game doesn't spell out for you, but if you got any other tips, let us know in the comments. People are going to be scrolling the comments looking for more help, so if you got anything good, drop it down there for people. But if you like this video and maybe it helped you out a little bit, clicking the like button's all you got to do. It helps us out. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.